Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grind and shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. I tell I'm running out of breath, I tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh, fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And on Fresh is the Word, we like to deliver wisdom through great stories from the minds of bright creatives of pop culture. Through those stories, we like to dissect the journey of our guests and present actionable lessons and advice for our listeners, no matter what career or avenue of artistry they pursue. And before we get into this episode, I want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foulmouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can always go to freshisthepodcast.com and just share any of the links for any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. And also, you can subscribe to Fresh is the Word pretty much anywhere that podcasts are streamed. And that includes Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, pretty much everywhere. And please rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It will definitely help out the show. If you want to contact me, you can always reach me by email at djkfresh@gmail.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KFresh is the Word, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can also follow Fresh is the Word on Twitter at Fresh is the Word, and that's is with an IZ, Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast. All right, this is episode 162. The guest for this episode is Justine Jones, lead vocalist of the UK post-hardcore band Employed to Serve, who released their latest album, Eternal Forward Motion, earlier this year via Spinefarm Records. Jones is also the label manager for Holy Roar Records, along with a contributor for Kerrang! Magazine. And during our chat, we talked about the new album and their new confidence in making this record. Growing into adulthood as a band, how the band formed, their musical influences, her upbringing, the topics the band likes to tackle, their process in writing an album, working with Spinefarm Records, and so much more. And before we get into this interview with Justine Jones, definitely want to remind you how you can support Fresh is the Word. I am on Patreon at patreon.com/Fresh is the Word. And for as little as $1 each month, you can support Fresh is the Word and everything that we're trying to do. And for the $3 a month tier, you can hear the Patreon exclusive episodes in which I dig deep into my audio archive of interviews that I've done outside the Fresh is the Word podcast for various publications for the past decade or so. Some I didn't even use at all. So go to patreon.com/freshoftheword and check out all the tiers that are available. And there are even some tiers where you can be a part of the podcast. So once again, go to patreon.com/freshoftheword and help out Fresh of the Word and everything that I'm trying to do with this podcast. And thank you to all the subscribers already for my Patreon. All right, let's get into the interview with Justine Jones, vocalist of the band Employed to Serve. Yeah, to start things off, Employed to Serve has a new album, Eternal Forward Motion. I really love it. It really kicks ass. It's hard. It's awesome. I don't know how many other compliments I can put in there. But when you were, what's your thoughts about the new album and how it kind of compares to the previous works that the band did?
I'm really happy with how it turned out. I feel compared to our last record, like it's a lot more confident. I feel like Warmth was like the start of us trying to finalize what kind of band we want to be. And yeah, like with this album, I kind of felt like we went in it a lot more confidently, and we kind of knew what we wanted to achieve with it.
With that confidence, how do you feel like you guys got there?
Just time. I mean, we've been a band we played our first ever show 6 years ago in August. And we started the band or the thought of the band when we were 19. So we sort of spent a lot of time sort of growing up through the band and traveling and stuff like that. And I just kind of feel like it took a lot of touring and sort of writing together to sort of get to this point. I think that's kind of similar for lots of bands. I mean, there's some bands that seem to do great records from the get-go. But for most people, it takes time and trial and error.
When you're in a band, when you're so young, you're coming out of your teenage years into adulthood. What sort of things did you learn about yourself during that time?
Probably I wasn't as patient as I thought I was, or like to think I was. But it's funny because it teaches you to be more tolerant, I think, and patient with other people, touring with other people, because you're in such a confined space all the time with each other. So you have to be really considerate of others. And I think being in a band really forces you into that. Otherwise, you're just going to fall out all the time. I mean, fortunately, we're quite docile people anyway, and there's not really many hotheads in the band. So it kind of works out quite nicely that way. But yeah, it's funny because it also kind of builds your confidence in the sense that we've broken down in foreign countries, and we've had to get home and organize all of our gear home and stuff. We've been through all those kind of things that other people wouldn't have. And I think that makes you feel very confident that you can kind of, take challenges like that in life.
How did everybody in the band come to be to, start this band? What was everybody doing beforehand, and why did this band come together?
So it started off between me and Sammy. So Sammy and I had been dating for 5 years prior to ETS starting. And basically we'd just gotten into bands like Converge, Norma Jean, Botch, loads of other Hydra Head and Deathwish bands. And we just wanted to sort of start something like it, because previously Sammy was in death metal bands and grindcore bands. And we went to loads of those kind of shows, and it took me a while to kind of tap into that kind of side of hardcore. So yeah, as soon as I kind of got into those bands, I really wanted to be in a band and do that kind of music. So we started off by doing loads of home demos in our back room, and there was this German label called Warg Records. They released our first two EPs on tape, and they both sold out, even though we hadn't played any shows because we weren't for a full lineup. So we just decided to try and make a full band out of it, because we thought, people obviously are into the music we're making. And then through that way, we found Robbie, because he was going to the same music university as Sammy did. Robbie's our drummer. And yeah, he got on board that way. And then, yeah, we've just been through a couple of guitar and bass changes, but now our final lineup is Rich, who's been our second guitarist for 3 years now, and Marcus, who's recently joined on bass.
You have a great like guttural sound to your vocals. What was it about that hardcore style that really drew to you?
Thank you. So I think it's just the energy, like with I love death metal and stuff like that, and like, but my favorite part of the death metal bands were things like bands like Obituary and like Dying Fetus, where they had sort of like hard times and breakdowns. And then I'd always like been aware and loved like Hatebreed since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I obviously didn't really kind of twig that there was lots smaller bands than them and loads of bands that influenced them. So it wasn't until I sort of started digging in that I really kind of felt very at home with hardcore and just metal in general.
Before you got into everything in regards to this band, what sort of a kid were you, and when did you first start getting like that itch to do music?
When I was a kid, when I was like kid, like I was very hyperactive, and that kind of went into my school years as well, and I had to really force myself to sort of sit still. So I guess when I started listening to faster and heavier music, it kind of reflected how I felt inside.
Right.
Constantly just like on like buzzing and stuff. It's like so funny, like even as an adult, I have to make sure I don't drink too much sugar or like caffeine because it just sends me up the wall. But so like I kind of got into those kind of bands through just listening to like guitar music on like like supermarket compilations, like Now 49 like introduced me to Blink 182, Sum 41, and like a few other bands, like I think Red Hot Chili Peppers and or like Nickelback were on there. So like I kind of like, oh, I like this like kind of quote unquote guitar music, and I guess it just kind of spiraled. Like all the older kids in school looked like goths, and I thought that was really cool, and I asked what music they listened to, and got into like Kerrang TV and Scuzz TV, and just that like those two TV shows and Metal Hammer and Kerrang magazine like dictated what I listened to for much of my teens. Like they got me into Kill Switch, As I Lay Dying, Trivium, Bullet, like all of those bands that were exploding when I was at school.
Yeah. Going into the new album, Eternal Forward Motion, your previous albums, the EP, you said the EP, when you first released it, it just, it sold out without even playing a show. You guys, got critical acclaim for your previous albums. What was the mind state of the band going into this album, along with sort of having more confidence? What did you really want to do on this album?
Like I'm a very goal orientated person. So like each release I have a little sort of wish list / bucket list of each album. So going into this one, like we really want to go to North America with it. We wanted to be available to a wider audience worldwide. So hence why we signed to Spinefarm. Like they have a bigger platform in North America and Japan and Australia, like everywhere other than UK and Europe. Because they have a big reach there as well, but we tour the UK and Europe quite a lot. But we just really wanted to go further afield with this one, so we should hopefully start going out to the States to tour. We just wanted to make a heavy record. Like I find a lot of bands, like after each record, they try and go lighter and more accessible, and I really want to do the opposite with this band.
Right, nice. Yeah, and with the topics that you guys like to tackle, how important is it to have substance on your records?
For me, I only like writing lyrics that I care about and that I can relate to. So there's lots of other bands who don't need that, and some of them are joke bands and they're really fun and still great bands. But like it's very important, especially since we don't make a living out of this band. It has to be like something I'm 100% and we're 100% invested in.
How much, of the lyrics that you come up with, mirror your own life, and then how much of it do you see, just things around you?
I think it's a bit of both. So Sammy and I share like lyric writing about 50-50, and we like write a lot of lyrics together and sort of refine them that way. But yeah, like a lot of it's to do with my own life or people around me or like very close to me. Like it won't be like a news story that will like sometimes things like that do inspire me, or like I've been reading a lot of John Steinbeck books, and like characters in those books kind of remind me a lot of characters in my own life. So sometimes that will spark some lyrics, but it's more or less people around me or like, family members and friends or myself.
On the new album, you have you have a single and a video for Harsh Truth. It really has to do with the suicides in the UK. How important is it to, bring life to, social issues like that?
Oh, massively. Like, in British culture, it's rude to, like, quote unquote, bring people down. Like, if someone asks you how your day is, like, it's sort of typical British, like, response is like, oh, I'm fine, thanks, how are you, kind of thing, rather than actually talking about it. Like, it's a very, like, I feel like as a culture, we're very closed off to it. And I think there's quite a few other countries who have similar situations like that. And I think especially for young men and like fathers and stuff like that, like it's a really hot topic at the moment, because one of the big leading killers of men in the UK is suicide. And I think that's like a massive issue across all genders to sort of address. And I think the more like there's a dialogue open about it, the more people are going to feel comfortable about talking about how they really feel. Because the thing is as well, like a lot of these like thoughts that people have can like root back to this one moment in time that if they had gotten help, they wouldn't have escalated to feeling suicidal.
As as someone that's part of the younger generation in the UK, how do you feel like you're represented there? What's sort of like the culture and society like these days?
So the media likes to, I think it's probably the same worldwide, likes to refer to us as millennials. They like to think we're lazy and we like moan a lot about the state of things.
Yes.
When really we're so misrepresented. Like we can't afford housing. Like most of us have got like degrees and highly educated, but we're in a lot of debt and can't get the high paying jobs to get the houses. And climate change is a very real problem. And I feel like a lot of these newspapers are just constantly trying to put our generation down, when really it's like the ones before us who have kind of caused a lot of damage.
Right.
And I think like it's kind of frustrating because like you grow up in a school system where you're told if you get a degree, if you work hard, you'll be able to have this like picket fence life where you'll be able to have 2 kids. You'll be able to have that nice house and things like that. And I've got friends who aren't in bands and are very qualified and, high up in their jobs, and they're still struggling to pay their mortgages. So I feel like there's something very wrong with like how things operate here.
We're, as that millennial generation, comes to be, and things are, out in the UK, you have the whole thing with Brexit going on, and there's like a lot of what you just said is things that are happening here in the Americas also. How do you feel like we should be able to fight back towards that? What do you feel like as a band? How do you use your art to get the voices heard that maybe doesn't get heard?
So none of our lyrics are political. They're sort of more aimed at, I guess, social issues, but I suppose they do kind of bind sometimes. But I guess it's just things like giving more to charities that you believe in, or just make a simple act of going to vote for someone you care about. But at the same time, not being brought down by all of this noise outside, because there's a lot within your own power that you can do to make your life better and better for those around you.
How do you said earlier that it's kind of impolite to bring people down. So you say, yeah, I'm all right or whatever. How do you feel like, we as people can, open ourselves up to be able to ask for help if there's issues going on in their lives, be a little bit more open with people?
I think more face-to-face interactions, like rather than sort of venting on things like social media, which I think, like for the most part, like I think it's really unhealthy because you're so detached from the people you're talking to because there's no face or voice to it.
Right.
I think like actually instead of like binging on Netflix and like sitting like scrolling through Instagram for hours, like go and see your friends or family and just be like, oh, I've had quite a bad day today. I'm really stressed at the moment of work and I'm scared I'm going to lose my job or I'm so worried about such and such. Like, I think because of having so much technology at our disposal and like combined with not having much money, I think people are going out less and like seeing people less, which I think is like really unhealthy.
What do you do to get sort of that face-to-face, time with your friends or the people that you care about?
How do I sort of like book it in or like go and do it?
Yeah, how do you sort of like, decompress, get that face-to-face time with other people or with the outside world, outside of, watching TV or being behind a computer or a smartphone or whatever?
So I personally, like when I get home from work, I leave my phone on like the kitchen table and I leave it there for the rest of the evening, or at least try to. And, just when I'm feeling like rubbish, instead of like watching TV or something, I try and go for a walk or I try and meet up with someone. Because it's so funny because I have to force myself to do it because that's no longer a habit. Like my new habit is just scrolling through Instagram. Like I am a complete hypocrite. Like,
yeah, I think a lot of people's go-to is to do that now.
Yeah. But like I find like the best thing, like, especially with working full time, like you convince yourself you don't have time to see people, right, and that you need to get an early night. When in reality, if you just like book seeing in people, like with people, like it's a doctor's appointment, book it in advance, set a date and a time, and stick to it. Like you find that you're like it's much easier to do, or even just set like every Wednesday you go out and see someone.
Oh yeah, I've been doing the same thing. I've been trying to do that exact same thing where, yeah, I just book it into my calendar and just do it that way because when we're all kids before smartphones and everything were really prevalent, things just kind of happen. You might get a phone call on your landline phone or whatever. Hey, come over. We're gonna hang out. Blah blah blah. Or you just walked over to your friend's house. But now we automatically just go behind our devices and it's like, then next thing you know, it's, 1:00 in the morning or something.
Yeah. And you kind of like kid yourself thinking, oh, I'm in a WhatsApp group with these people. Like, oh, it's like seeing them. And it's really not. Like, it's so funny how you're like, oh, I've been chatting to them all week. It's fine. I don't need to see them. And like, I think another like big thing as well, like when you're with people, don't look at your phone.
Yeah, I definitely try to do that. I'm like, I just, put it on silent or don't vibrate or whatever. Make sure that I'm definitely giving them my undivided attention because I hate when other people do that to me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so funny because like it's not even people trying to be rude. It's such a automatic thing, like blinking sometimes. That you don't even realize you're doing it. And you have to like really retrain yourself to just sort of like not take your phone. Like I've actually like much to people's annoyance, like started leaving it at home when I go out to meet with people for coffee.
Do you find yourself to be a social person? Like when you're out and about, do you like talking to people? Do you feel comfortable being in crowds?
Depends on my mood, but for the most part, yeah. Like I'm quite an extrovert. I do need sort of like time to like recharge and stuff if I've been on a long tour and around people all the time. But yeah, for the most part, I do like talking to people, especially now that I've left retail. It made me an introvert and hate everything. Because before I started working in retail, I genuinely had a love for humanity, and it just went.
Yeah, I think any of us that have to deal with like the end user or whatever, like a customer, like my day job is doing tech support. So
Oh, Jesus, yeah, similar to what I used to do.
yeah, so yeah, at that point, like you can go and get into those realms where you're just like, I don't want to talk to people, like actual talk to people ever. When you sort of get into like those type of things.
Oh yeah, massively. Like it just makes me like want to implode. Like because some people are just so rude, I can't even fathom it. Like I just because I would never treat anyone that way. So it's so weird to me when you're in the position of like being served by someone that you feel like you own them and you can talk to them how you want.
Right. Like recently on this one TV show I was watching, someone was saying that just to paraphrase that, dealing with customers makes you want to watch those true crime specials for inspiration.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. But the worst part is though, is there's some genuinely lovely people who used to buy me like cookies and coffee and stuff because they were so thankful. But it's always like it's such human nature to only remember the really bad ones.
Right. I think that just kind of happens all the time. Even when you're like an artist, like you can like have 100 great reviews for your album, but then that one like bad review, that one person that's like this shit sucks, that will like sting.
Oh yeah, like it'll keep you up at night. You'd be like, oh, piece of shit. No, I'm terrible. But yeah, like it's totally that. I guess it's such a pessimistic cycle to get in, and you have to sort of try and get out of it.
How do you sort of deal with, criticism of, the music of the band? Do you ever just, do you ever think about it? What do you do about it?
I know this isn't probably healthy, but I tell myself I'm the greatest thing ever. So like, if like they don't get it, that's their problem. I just try and like be like, well, in the sense that I tried the best I could in that moment in time, and it's like if people aren't into it, then it's just like, oh well, I had a really good time making it, and like I spent a really long time like having a go at like doing the best I could. So I guess yeah, and like at the end of the day, music's so subjective. I mean, there's some massive bands that I'm like, who the hell made them big? Do you know what I mean? But so yeah, I think there's always going to be someone who dislikes it. And at the end of the day, I'd rather someone love or hate our music rather than be lukewarm, because I think that's the biggest insult, because that just means you're boring.
When you guys are going into the studio, or even before you go in the studio to write an album, what's sort of the process? What's sort of the first things that you're doing to prepare for a new album?
It's for me, it's literally on my hour train to and from work. It's just listening to the tracks over and over and over again on the playlist. That's how I sort of like learn them, and then in terms of like writing and stuff, we have like quite a few band practices where we try and play it all live and see if it works live before recording it. Yeah, it's just sort of stuff like that really. It's literally just like exhausting the songs to the point where you don't want to listen to it when you get the masters sometimes.
Did you guys self-produce this this new album?
So we went to Lewis John's at the Ranch in Southampton. So he did our first two records, and with this one we were just like, we really enjoyed working with him on the last two. So yeah, we just went with him again. He's just such a chilled out person, and he's really good at what he does. And the studio is actually in a farm, so it's just quite a nice space to work in.
What does he kind of bring to the project for you guys? What does he get out of you guys?
He because he's so patient with you, he's really good if you're having a really bad recording day at getting the best take he can without sort of like making you feel more stressed. And also like we're quite open to sort of experimenting with like kind of guitar sounds and stuff like that. So it's a bit more fun for him, I think.
How does the band sort of get through like creative differences, if you have any?
We don't really have any, actually, to be fair. We all listen to very much similar music, so yeah, like I think we're quite diplomatic. So yeah, like we don't really have any differences like that. And I guess when it comes down to it, we have a sort of majority rule kind of like take on things. Like if three band members want something to happen, then it happens, unless like the other two are so against it. But yeah, like we haven't really had any issues with that.
How do you make sure that what you do in the studio can translate well to your live show?
So what we do is we make sure that like we try and like practice it in the practice room first to see if it works, because there's some things if you do extra bits in the studio and you can't perform them live, I think it really takes away from the show. So yeah, we just make sure it sounds great in the practice room.
Since this album is out into the world, how do you see the progress of this band in relatively a short period of time? You guys are still, relatively a new band, basically, in comparison to other bands. Where do you see the best progress in it all?
As in terms of like where we hope to sort of like get to from this album?
Yes.
So I think, yeah, we'd like to sort of get to the point where we can comfortably like headline like a world tour eventually. That would be really nice. Like to like go somewhere like Australia and like America and have at least 100 people there. That would be really nice. That's kind of like what I want to aim for.
Yeah, I think you guys will get there really soon. How do you feel like, what's the next step to be able to do that? I know you guys are with Spinefarm Records, and they have a wide reach. How has it been working with them, and what is those next steps to try to do that worldwide tour?
Yeah, it's been really good working with them. I was a bit apprehensive because the label I work for was our old label, so I had absolute control over the release. So it was quite scary for me handing over the reins, but they're a really good team and they've worked really hard for us, and we're really happy with working with them. And in terms of sort of taking the next step, it's just a case of getting support slots from bigger bands like across different territories. Like that's how we did UK and how we did Europe. Like, and we're still using that to sort of like, like build our own sort of headline shows. It's just a case that when you're taken out on a support run, like you're advertising yourself to a whole new fan base in theory. So you just got, your game is to sort of try and convert those people into fans.
Right.
And yeah, so it's just a case of just getting some decent support slots and festival slots, really.
When you were talking about handing, the reins of this, album over to the label, how did that feel? How did it feel to sort of give up a little bit of control with, working with Spinefarm?
I like to be I am a control freak. So yeah, it was quite hard, but at the same time, I wanted it to happen because I wanted to have a separation from my work and my band, because I never wanted to seem biased to the other bands on our roster. So yeah, like this is a lot easier. Like, for example, like I can do ETS things on my lunch break or after work now, and then I can like give my full attention to our the bands on our roster when I'm at work. It's just a lot easier because sometimes the lines would blur. And I felt like I let things for employed to serve slip a bit because I didn't want to seem biased.
In your past experience, what sort of things outside of just the band do you have sort of experience in when it comes to the music industry?
Outside of being in a band, I guess booking shows. Like I had to book a lot of our own shows when we first started because no one knew who we were and no one would book us. So I used to book a lot of shows. I booked all of our tours at the beginning. And yeah, I guess I do a lot of logistics kind of stuff still, like booking like bands and organising people and stuff like that. It's quite a good life lesson, I think, being in a band, especially when you're a DIY at the beginning.
Right, definitely. And what, for anybody listening to this podcast, doesn't matter what sort of avenue of artistry that they're in, what do you feel like being in a band, teaches you that can be transferable to anything in life? It
teaches you a lot about yourself, which is really helpful because it kind of teaches you to like self-reflect on situations where you could have been in the wrong, and I think that's like a really invaluable life tool. I think like multitasking, just like, you know, sticking to commitments. Like, I don't know why more jobs don't hire band members, because they're so hardworking. Like, getting in at 3 a.m. and then basically showering to get to work the next day, and they'll still be on time for you because they need the money. So like, I don't, rather than like people who don't have any other hobbies outside of work and they just drag their knuckles through the day. So yeah, like I think like there's a special like breed of person, or slash, they're probably very crazy. Like, I think there's something very wrong with band members. I mean, like, you're like doing all of this for no money and sleeping on floors. No, I think being in a band or doing like something you love doing is such a rewarding thing to do, and I think it's so much more interesting than just sort of like going for the whole, oh, I'm just going to work and that's it for the rest of my life.
Right.
Sorry.
You mentioned about sort of learning that idea of being, you know, perhaps being in the wrong, and, you know, thinking about things like that. You know, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with being, you know, with having honesty with yourself when it comes to dealing with a band and just, you know, in life general?
I think it's just the breathing technique. Anytime, like, I think you should never react in anger, because then it just, I don't know, I just think that's a very childish thing to do, and I think part of being an adult is being like, what's the word? Just being like considerate of others. I mean, sometimes other people are just being inconsiderate, but sometimes you just got to be the better person to rise above it and just get a situation done, like find a solution. Because like, there's no point in wasting your life like arguing and like, you know, dwelling on like mistakes and things like that, because in like, you know, couple weeks you won't even remember that situation. I think that's like the main thing to like remember. Like, it's always so insignificant when you look back on it.
You know, why do you personally do this crazy thing of being in a band and sleeping on floors for no money and whatnot? You know, why do you do it?
I just love music. I love performing. I love meeting new people. Like, being in a band is like the most rewarding thing I've done with my life, and I wouldn't change it. Like, even when I've been really stressed to the point of wanting to scream, I do. I just think it's so much more like rewarding than working a job I hate and getting stressed through that, because there are people who are working like, you know, they're probably like bankers or something, and they're having like the worst stressful time ever, and all they're doing is just going home to their massive TVs, whereas I will come home and I would have like been to about 6 or 7 countries in one tour and met loads of people, and I just really like the fact that I have friends like dotted around Europe that I can contact if I need somewhere to stay, or
you
know, go for dinner with when I'm near them. It's just really nice. I've got some like lifelong friends now from touring.
Yeah, and you get to scream on stage.
Yeah, exactly. I get to yell at people. It's free therapy.
Right. How important is it to just make good friendships, you know, whether it is with other musicians or just people, you know, you meet on the road? You know, how important is it to have real friendships?
Oh, it's fundamental. Like, at the end of the day, futures, like, we need like family, we need friends. Otherwise, you know, it's scientifically proven that we will be miserable. Like, they're like literally on the kind of living pyramid of needing water and food is like social interaction. So like, having these friendships where like you've been through like, you know, rubbish times and good times together is just such a great bond to have, rather than just lots of superficial friends that you kind of try and keep in contact with through school.
Is there anything that you do creatively outside of this band?
Yeah, so like I draw, and then what else do I do? I used to do photography a little bit more frequently than I do now. Yeah, I'm sort of like, I kind of dabble in a lot of things really. I'm getting back into drawing again, because that's something I can do whilst listening to my records.
Yeah. What sort of feelings do What sort of feelings does your music invoke in yourself when you listen back to it?
It makes me want to go to the gym. I kind of like I feel like energized and stuff. I guess it's just because I associate with playing live, and that makes me feel energized, especially after a long drive.
Right. Do you enjoy like the traveling part of being in a band? You know, how do you sort of deal with, you know, driving to different places to play? You know, do you like that, or, you know, is it something that you really have to prepare yourself for?
Depends on how long the drive is. So I split the driving with Sammy, so I kind of opt to drive just to kill some time. But I read a lot of books and stuff, and I try and keep myself busy in the band so my mind doesn't go to mush. But yeah, like, I mean, the overnight 10-hour drivers are very challenging for sure. And I'm like, why am I doing this? But no, for the most part, I don't mind it. Just as long as it's like the heating works in the van, I'm happy.
Oh, just wait till you do a U.S. tour and you realize how much of nothing is in the middle of the U.S.
Yeah, just like these weird service stations.
Yeah, and just when you have to drive from one city to the next city and you realize there's nothing in between it, and you're just driving for a while.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I'm sure it'll be all right. I'll take lots of books for those ones.
What sort of books do you like to read when you're on the road?
A lot of nonfiction. I try and stay away from like things that are too nihilistic because that bums me out. But at the moment, I read Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy. So Authority, Annihilation, and I've forgotten the last one. I read those, and I read Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which is very depressing. And I also read East of Eden, and I read Dune. So like it's kind of like a mixture of sort of American like novelists and a lot of sci-fi as well. I like sci-fi.
Is there any sort like with the books that you read or anything else? Is there any sort of things like that or any other research that goes into the lyrics of your songs?
Kind of. There's a couple of like lyrics in the album that was inspired by Philip K. Dick's "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?"
Yeah.
So there's like a few like there's this kind of bit where there's like it had this mood organ. And they put like punch in like emotions they want to feel. So I thought that was quite cool. But yeah, apart from that, it's like only like kind of little bits that I get inspired by.
You know, thus far, you know, where has been some of your favorite places that you've you know, gone with the band thus far? You know, what are some of your favorite cities?
I really like going to Prague in Czech Republic. That's like a really nice place to go. And I really like, where else do I like? Berlin's really cool. There's lots of like nice food places and bars, and there's quite a few cool tourist attractions there. Yeah, I always like got a soft spot for Tilburg as well in the Netherlands. We've been there so many times with the Incubate Festival and that. It kind of feels like a tour home.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of bands say the Czech Republic goes hard.
Yeah, they're really awesome. Like I feel like unfortunately a lot of bands miss them out and just go for Germany. But they're so awesome out there. Like they always make the effort and they go crazy. They just tend to be really like nice people out there.
You know, whether it's, you know, stuff you read online or what people say at your shows, you know, face to face, what sort of feedback do you get from your audience?
The nicest feedback we get is it tends to be that people can relate to our songs a lot and that they've helped them through negative times, which is really nice. And other times it's just like, it's really cool because people are just like, oh, you're my gym playlist. You've helped me like beat loads of PBs. So that's quite cool.
Yeah, you guys have definitely been on my work playlist when I'm just trying to get through the day at work.
That's good to hear. Yeah, anything to get you through a difficult time. Hopefully our album will be there.
Definitely. What is, I always like to ask this question in interviews is, what's sort of a nugget of knowledge from your life that anybody listening to this interview, doesn't matter what sort of avenue of artistry that they're in, that they could sort of project into their own life?
I think the biggest one, like this is kind of like a life-wide one. I think just don't take yourself too seriously. I think like that's the biggest one, like, because it boils down to you getting stressed over things, like over like your work and things like that, and like just allow yourself to make mistakes, and like just don't take yourself too seriously, because like you're your own harshest critic. So don't make life hard for yourself. Love thyself.
How do you sort of balance that, like not taking yourself too seriously while being serious about making art?
I flip between. Like I'm trying to be like I'm a bit getting better at it as I'm getting older. Like I've started like running and things like that, and just trying to like give myself genuine breaks from things. I think is like the best thing I've done, because sometimes I get really obsessive over everything. Hence why I work for a label and I'm in a band, because I love music and I'm obsessed over it. I don't think that's healthy to a degree. But I think it's important to be a bit more balanced as a person and have other things going on that you can turn to when something's not going great.
With being in a band and working with working for a label, what's, in the future, if you wanted to step away from being a performing musician, is there anything in the music industry that you'd like to do?
No. I love playing live so much. Like I really enjoyed like working for a label as well, but I have no desire to be a booking agent or a manager. It just seems very stressful with little reward to me personally. I like playing the shows, and like as a label manager, I love like going to release shows and seeing like the album translate live and people getting excited. But literally nothing else excites me about the music industry.
If you wanted to step away from performing, is there anything outside the music industry that you'd like to do, or do you just want to perform until you die, like Lemmy?
Probably perform until I die. I worked a little bit in film before this, and my passion, like I have an animation degree, but I just didn't find that anywhere near as rewarding as music. Like I guess like that. I think that's pretty much it. Like I just love playing music so much. I've kind of resigned myself to being that old person on stage.
When you're on stage, performing, what kind of goes through your mind when you're seeing the crowd out there, really feeling the music?
It's really nice. There's nothing quite like it. It's like for once I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm just thinking about performing the songs for these people, and I think that's why why I like performing and why I like running. I think it's because you have to concentrate on your breathing and you have to concentrate on like what you're doing, and I think that's nice because like I think with everyone, like you're constantly multitasking, your brain's scanning everything around you all the time, and you're thinking about random things. But like I think that's the one time like my brain goes quiet.
I think right now we're in a great time in regards to bands like yours, bands that are sort of adjacent to hardcore music. How do you, where do you see this, this sort of style of music going in the future? And, how do you feel like, you can be sort of unique in it all?
I think there's always room for changing things while still being metal. I'd like to think it would just keep getting heavier. Like I think metal as a whole is such a great genre, and as much as I like things like hip hop and like rap, I kind of get worried about people going too much into that in metal, because I think the whole essence of metal is what I love about it so much. So I think like I'd like to think it wouldn't dilute and it would just get heavier.
What sort of music do you like outside of metal?
I like a lot of things like, I guess rap and hip hop, like JPEG Mafia, Brockhampton, I like bands like Soft Kill, Cold Cave, Drab Majesty, just sort of loads of like almost like hardcore adjacent things. It's kind of funny, like it's almost like hip hop that hardcore kids like Odd Future stuff. And what else do I listen to? I listen to a lot of post rock as well. And there's this band called Duster that was like from the 90s that I've just gone into a lot. I really like them. I like lots of stuff from the Flenser, so like Have a Nice Life, Giles Corey, Planning for Burial. So it's quite a lot, really. I listen to like Purity Ring as well, which are more electronic.
You know, listening to a wide variety of music, you know, how does that sort of help your creativity?
Yeah, it helps you a lot because you kind of get like ideas for like how you could go like phrasing, like lyrically and things like that. More importantly, like I listen to music 9 hours a day at work. I listen to it an hour on the train, an hour back, and I listen to it when I get home. So realistically, I can't listen to the same kind of music all day, else I'll get sick of it.
Right.
Reason, but it's cool because it means I properly digest albums, which is nice.
Cool. And with sort of digesting music that way, you know, how does that help with creating your own music? You know, when you're creating a whole album for yourself.
I think I'm more aware of like flow, I guess, especially Sammy as he does like all the songwriting. I think by listening to albums in their entirety, like I think that's really important for one because like the artist has spent ages writing this body of work for you to listen to and not just one song, and loads of songs work in the context of an entire album. And also you kind of see what works and what doesn't work. So that's quite a good way to sort of like write your own album.
Right. And I always like to, you know, end my interviews with the same question, and it's okay if you don't have a answer for it or not. And the question is, who is somebody that you could recommend for this podcast for me to interview? Someone that I could realistically interview that would have some good stories or lessons to talk about.
Probably Larissa Stupa from Venom Prison. She's like, so I'm pretty certain she's Russian but grew up in Germany. And I've read some stories about her in Kerrang when she used to sort of like get in fights with Nazis and stuff like that. Like, so she's pretty interesting, and she's been in a hardcore band since she was quite young, and now she's in this awesome death metal band. And like I've also know her quite well. She's really awesome.
Okay, yeah, I am familiar with them. Before we get out of here, you know, where can people go online to get more information about the band and everything you guys are doing and the new album, Eternal Forward Motion?
I think the best place is probably like our Facebook or Instagram. And then in terms of like listening to our album, it's like on all streaming services, and it can be bought from Spinefarm US's store.
All right, great. It's been awesome talking with you. Like I said, I love the new album. I've been listening to it so much since I got it. And good luck with everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, dude. I appreciate it.
All right, that was my interview with Justine Jones, lead vocalist of the UK post-hardcore band Employed to Serve. Go cop that new album, Eternal Forward Motion. There'll be links in the show notes for this episode at freshtothepodcast.com on where you can stream and purchase that new album and where you can follow Justine and Employed to Serve online. All right, another show in the books. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.